A few years back, I worked at a Methodist church on LSU's campus. And right behind the church was the campus ministry building. It didn't belong to the church. It actually belonged to all Louisiana Methodists. It's the Wesley Foundation, kind of a Methodist college ministry for all of LSU's students. And the campus ministry had tried their hand at a community garden several times. And while I was there, the garden was mainly weeds. I can relate to that. If Adam wasn't in my life, our garden would be mainly weeds. But yeah, but it makes sense to me that with schoolwork and finals and all the socializing that college students do, that a garden might fall to the wayside. It certainly would have for me. But in the midst of all of those weeds, some of which were rivaling me in height, there was a lemon tree. It was this big, tall thing, and it always produced these fruits that were about the size of a baseball. The problem was that they were hard to use them for anything because they didn't taste like lemon. Adam and I couldn't stand the thought of all of that fruit going to waste. And so we thought maybe that the zest would at least be good. Nope. And then we wondered maybe it was kind of like a kefir lime. If you don't know those, they're in a lot of Thai food, Southeast Asian food, and you use the leaves to kind of season things, kind of like a citrus bay leaf. Yeah, that didn't work either. We were just stewing a bunch of tasteless leaves. And then I know you're thinking, well, why didn't you make lemonade? There's a saying about that. But we did. And even with all the sugar, it still tasted nothing like lemonade. It was just awful. Any way you looked at it, the fruit wasn't good. But the one thing that bothered me the most was that every time I went to pick from the tree, I would get stuck by all the thorns. Thorns were all the way up and down its branches, especially where the fruit was. So you get stuck 2 or 3 times just trying to get that low-hanging fruit that looked like it was just right there for you. And man, they hurt. Like, those thorns hurt as bad as a stinging nettle. I mean, it was just, no fun. Funky fruit, thorns. Turns out, it was a bad tree, even though I didn't want to admit it. But it hadn't always been a bad tree. It had likely been a tree that just needed some help. And so someone grafted the citrus onto a hardier rootstock species. Wild stock, we call it sometimes. And in the best case scenario, the 2 trees are grafted together, they merge. And it gives the citrus tree a higher cold tolerance. It furnishes disease resistance. It provides stronger roots for the tree. Overall, grafting gives the citrus tree a better chance at surviving, a better chance at producing good fruit for years to come. And as a result, the wild tree, once grafted to the citrus tree, now nourishes humans and animals alike. When we think about it, any good citrus that we've had has come from a thorny tree with grace grafted on it. And it struck me as an analogy for faith that isn't half bad. We all have our thorns, but by God's grace, we can nourish this world around us. The problem is, you've got to cultivate that tree. That wild stock is always trying to creep in, and you've got to know what to look for, because you don't see the thorns until later. You might see a shoot coming up from where it shouldn't be, or maybe notice that the leaves look just a little different. But by the time the thorns appear on the tree, it's putting a lot of energy into multiplying that wild stock that should be going into the good fruit. And by the time the bad fruit appears, there's hardly any good fruit left on the tree. So you've got to prune the tree. You've got to recognize the signs of the wild tree and cut it back. Those bad parts, they start to stick you. They start to be thorny to those around us. The good news is that with people, it's never too late. God always finds a good tree left within us. But with a bad tree, once the fruit goes bad, it's no good for anything but burning in the fire. And that's what we did. The lemon tree had become a briar patch. And so the campus ministry intern cut it down and we had ourselves a bonfire. Over the flames, we had our usual end of the semester ritual where students burned their class notes while roasting marshmallows for s'mores. And amidst that end of the semester celebration, there was a little sadness because of the loss of the lemon tree. That was years worth of church lemonade right there. Lemon curd for the junior league, fresh citrus for the homebound. Of course, the church had stopped using the tree long ago because Southern people, we don't just like food, we like food that tastes good. That would explain the 5 or 10 pounds I've put on since I've been here. A good bit has come from the Joy Club or Lunch Bunch or delicious baked treats or dinners that people have been kind enough to share. Maybe a pound or two here and there from the snowballs and bread pudding that Adam and I keep testing out to see which one's the best in town. But back to that lemon tree. The church and the campus ministry, they hadn't been nourished by this tree for years. But no one wanted to believe that it had gone bad on their watch. That what had nourished their parents and grandparents wouldn't nourish them in the same way. Pruning the tree meant admitting that there were problems. Pruning is painful, especially when it comes to beloved institutions. If we don't prune them along the way, we look and see that thorny stock is infiltrating, choking off good fruit. And then at some point we have to uproot it altogether, plant something else in its place. But even that requires a stump grinder, which certainly isn't a painless process. This lemon tree, it literally caused pain anytime someone got near it. But even though it looked like a nourishing lemon tree, it wasn't a nourishing lemon tree. It was something else dressed up as one. Now, sometimes we hear Jesus say things like good fruit and bad fruit, wolves in sheep's clothing, and we get categorical. This is good, this is bad, this is a sheep howling and wagging its tail. We forget how a fruit tree can go bad. We forget how this chapter starts, that my brother or sister has a speck of dust in their eye, and I'm fixated on getting it out. Meanwhile, I've got a whole plank in mine. Have you ever had a 2x4 in your eye? I imagine it hurts. Your glasses don't fit anymore. Blinking is a little more difficult than it used to be. And it's like if you're working on your deck and you think, I just need one more board. Where did I put that? And then everyone's looking at you like you've got 3 heads, bewildered, while you can't see what they're seeing. This plank coming out of your eye. It's ridiculous, but it's what we do. We've all done it. We don't quite know why, but it seems it's in our nature to criticize others instead of looking at ourselves. It's that wild stock creeping in. Jesus calls us to something different, to be better than that. In fact, Jesus calls us to be the kind of good that we can't be on our own, the kind of good that we can only get at by laying it all down, by asking God to reshape our priorities. I'm a firm believer that none of us are all good and none of us are all bad. I think that in this age of social media and polarization, that we often label people as wholly wrong or right, as wholly good or bad, but we're all more complex than that. Some of us look like we have it all together. It looks like all of our fruit is good, but at night, once everyone's gone to bed, the demon of addiction rears its ugly head. Or some of us volunteer and we make sure that the hungry are fed and the sick are attended to and the people in prisons aren't forgotten. But when we're with our families, we yell and demean and put others down. We all have good fruit. We all have thorns. And so this week, let's start the process of pruning. It's not a pretty or a pleasant practice. And it only happens when we take a good, long look at ourselves. When we can honestly acknowledge where our thorns are and then get to work on those growing edges. It means laying it down, having difficult conversations, asking for forgiveness, admitting our wrongs, and working to bring healing and wholeness. It's hard work, but it's God's work. It's our work. So let's be brave. Let's pick up the pruning shears and get to work. Amen.